Welcome back, everybody. It's time for the Tuesday edition of Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey Sports original podcast, heard on the radio in Las Vegas, 1015 KDON and 840 KXNT. Do us a favor, subscribe to the show, wherever you get your audio. Just look for Silver and Black Today. Do us a favor. Also, rate and review. We certainly appreciate that. If you're watching us on video, hit that like button. Also, subscribe and the bell for notifications when we have a new video. Scott Gilbranson back with Mr. Moe Moten, Moe's senior NFL writer over at Bleacher Report, also Raiders columnist at sportsnot.com. You can find him on X at Moe Moten, Moemoton. I am at LV Gully, the show SNB today. Okay, how are you doing after the heartbreaking end to the Raiders' overtime loss 30-29 to the Jacksonville Jaguars on Sunday? Are you still smarting about it? Are you over it? Are you used to it? Because they're 2-6. We're going to talk a little bit about the reaction to the game here in the first segment. Second segment, we're talking about the trade deadline later today. Right? Are you ready for a trade deadline? Could some Raiders be on the move? Jackson Powers-Johnson, Jacoby Meyers, anybody else? Also, could the Raiders actually buy at the trade deadline? We'll see. We'll discuss that in segment number 2. In segment number 3, we're going to get to the Raider Nation switchboard with your calls. Okay, Mo, first time you and I have talked since the game on Sunday. In the post-game show, I know you talked a little bit about this too on your Bleacher Report live after the game. I thought we saw some improvement in certain areas. Clearly, Brock Bowers, I don't know if you call that an improvement other than the fact that he was on the field and he is who he is. I call him Superman in the flesh. He proved that out again against the Jaguars and elevated that Raiders offense. We also saw some bad stuff, like they couldn't tackle on defense again. That was terrible. It was horrific to watch. So we'll jump into that. But give me your impressions, first of all, of this game. Overall, did you like some improvements, i.e. Brock Bowers and some of the other things we saw on offense? And what didn't you like? Repeating mistakes, things that weren't resolved maybe over the bye.
So I want to start by saying I'm never completely encouraged by a loss. There are no moral losses for me, right? I'm past that stage. I've seen enough moral losses as a person who's covered the Raiders and watched the Raiders for decades now. So I'm over the moral losses. But I will say, I remember I asked this question a few weeks ago, what did the Raiders leave in week 1? And a lot of our listeners and fans answered, well, a healthy Brock Bowers. It turns out a healthy Brock Bowers changes the offense, which I still feel is pathetic that you have to depend on one player for your offense to run properly or to function at all. The Raiders' offense is unwatchable without Brock Bowers healthy. Now, remember, because he got hurt in week 1 and he kind of hobbled around with a brace, but he wasn't himself. And you saw the difference. Now, they put up 29 against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Of course, it wasn't enough, but that's the best the offense has looked since week 1. And the difference is obviously Brock Bowers. But still, Geno Smith threw an interception on Sunday. He stared down Michael Mayer. Now, Michael Mayer also, if you know defenders around you or in your vicinity, you have to step up onto that pass and make sure that's not an interception. So, bit of a blame to go to both players there, but Geno Smith still throws an interception. And at the end of the game, we all saw it. He pump fakes and is a bad at passes at the line of scrimmage. The bad at passes, the line of scrimmage have been an issue all season. I believe Geno Smith leads the league in passes bad at the line of scrimmage. In this case, he pump fakes, and he had an open receiver, I believe Tyler Lockett, in the end zone. Pass gets bad at the line of scrimmage, game over. So, Mr. Big Bucks, a.k.a. Geno Smith, this is not what we pay you the big bucks for. Not we, but the Raiders. You have to come through in those big situations, and he didn't do it.
Yes, and I've sent him, I bought him a Batman mask and sent it to him in Las Vegas, so you can wear that on the field as Batman if you get it. But here's what Geno Smith said after the game, Mo, by the way. I want to play this quote. There we are in 3 week. We knew they would be 3 week. That's the call down there. We had an alert we wanted, had the play. Chip Kelly called a great play, got the alert we wanted. They reacted to we wanted. Tyler Lockett's open in the back of the end zone. We win the game if I get that pass, is what he says. And then on double clutching, our good buddy Jesse Merrick asked him, on that double clutch, and he said, "That's football, brother." Now, Mo, I don't know about you, but I don't see how that's football, brother. The double pump, meaning that you hesitated. He hesitated, which allowed the defensive lineman to jump up and then bat the ball. That's not football, brother. That's bad football, brother. That's Geno Smith football, brother. in this season. And look, Geno Smith had a better game overall. That's not saying much, though. When you're one of the worst, or if not the worst quarterback in the NFL, to have a better game, okay, great, it's a step up. But when it counted most, Mr. Big Bucks, as you mentioned from that viral clip on the youth football field, Big Bucks got to win big games and big moments, and he failed to do that.
He absolutely did. So I saw the back and forth. Our friend Vinny Bonsignore was going back and forth with a lot of fans because he said that Geno Smith, played well. This loss isn't on him. And there were fans that were saying, "What are you talking about? Did you see, the interception? Did you see the last play of the game?" And I'll say this about that back and forth is, if you look at the box score, if you just purely look at the box score, Geno Smith's numbers are pleasing to the eye. No doubt about it.
Yes.
Much improved compared to what we were seeing. He couldn't even throw for 100 yards against the Kansas City Chiefs, right? He was struggling to get over 100. So he looked more like week one Geno Smith. But the problem is, one, he didn't get away from the interceptions, doing his 11th interception on Sunday. And two, as we just talked about, in a big moment where you need your quarterback to make a big play, Mr. Big Bucks, he didn't do it. It falls flat. He pump fakes when he should have just thrown it. He was a bit hesitant. Not a bit. He was hesitant, and it cost the Raiders the football game. Now, I will say the loss isn't entirely on Geno Smith because there's some other issues. You talked about the poor tackling. Also, I'll say this again. The Raiders have the worst special teams unit in the league, Scott.
Absolutely.
The missed extra point changed the complexion of that football game because if Daniel Carlson doesn't miss the extra point, the Jaguars have to drive down the field, down 4 points to score a touchdown. But instead, because of that missed extra point, they were able to settle for a field goal and send that game into overtime. Then when you go into overtime, they allow a 54-yard kick return to Austin Trammell to put themselves in good position to score the go-ahead touchdown. So the Raiders special teams unit failed them in that case. In both cases, the defense was poor coming out of a bye, which is inexcusable under Pete Carroll, who's a defensive-minded head coach, and Geno Smith didn't come through in big moments. Again, all three phases of the game failed the Raiders and contributed to that loss.
Absolutely. And you talked about the Raiders lost by 1 point. I mean, it would have been a tie game. I understand they were going for the win, which was the right choice.
Exactly.
Let's make that clear.
Mm-hmm.
Pete Carroll did the right thing there.
Mm-hmm.
But that 1 point is what they lost by. Then you tack on the 3 points from the Geno Smith interception. That's 4 points they gave away. They gave away 4 points, and they lost by 1. So you just do the math there, and you can see it. So yes, and I see this, and look, for you Aiden O'Connell cultists out there who keep bugging me that he's a better option, and I it's hard to argue that he's not a better option. I don't know that he's a better option. Is he a wash? Probably. Could Geno Smith, if Geno Smith's number was taken out of that box score and it said Aiden O'Connell, I'd fully believe it, right? And same with the result. I mean, he could have had an efficient game like that. I don't know. He doesn't move in the pocket as well as Geno, and Geno had to move in the pocket a few times, so maybe you take some of that away.
Mm-hmm.
But look, they don't have a quarterback on the roster here that is the future of the team. When they got Geno Smith was the guy who was supposed to elevate the position so that at a game deciding moment, that's the difference between Geno Smith and an Aiden O'Connell or a Kenny Pickett or whoever else you got on the roster, right? That was supposed to be it. Not it. And guess what? Geno Smith will start this game. He could have 2 limbs removed and he'd still start under Pete Carroll. I'm convinced of that. It just is what it is, folks. Pete Carroll's not going to move away from decisions. He continues to put people on the inactive list to punish them. I really believe that, Mo. I'm tired of it. Dante Thornton, who hasn't played well, don't get me wrong, was put on there after the game. They asked him what was the issue. Well, he doesn't. I put Tyler Lockett on because he can play special teams. We haven't seen much special teams out of Dante Thornton, so maybe he'll earn his way back. I mean, just ridiculous stuff I see out of Pete Carroll. By the way, I want to get to Pete Carroll too after the game, who said on the game-ending play, Lockett was wide open in the end zone. The play was perfect. They tipped the ball. I didn't see who tipped it. I couldn't see that. I'm looking at Tyler. If he catches it, we're winning the game. I thought we won the game because Geno Smith went up to him. It was exactly right. We just got the ball knocked down. Well, what? How about Pete saying, listen, quarterback's got to make a play there. That's it. But he won't say that, right?
He's not going to throw Geno Smith under the bus. And I go back.
Is it throwing him under the bus, though, Mo? I mean, listen, I know what you're saying, but is it throwing somebody in the bus just to state the obvious? Look, hey, Quarterback just couldn't get the ball there. He got knocked down at the line. And to your point, he's been having this issue all season long. We got to make a better. He doesn't have to throw him. He said, look, we just got to make a better play. We were close. We couldn't execute. I mean, you don't have to single out the player, right?
Mm-hmm. What I've noticed with Pete Carroll is he's not going to openly criticize his favorites. He's just not going to do it. Geno Smith, right. Jordan Meredith, Alex Kappa. He's not going to openly criticize those guys. He will, though, call for benching or openly criticize the players who are not some of his favorites. JPJ, we saw, as you mentioned, Dante Thornton Jr., inactive, which, and I know I said last week that I wouldn't mind a Tyler Lockett signing if it's not at the expense of some of the young rookies and young players playing time. That decision I did not like. Now, I think as time goes on, you can have Tyler Lockett and Dante Thornton Jr. both active. Absolutely. I didn't like, making one active for over the other. And I think Dante Thornton Jr., as the season goes on, will get back into the rotation. But with Pete Carroll, it's very clear that it's more than just on-field football decisions. Like, hey, I know Dante Thornton Jr. wasn't great over the past month. But you have to, I hate to say it, but you have to kind of be on his good side, because once you get on his bad side, you could wind up being benched, inactive, see your role reduced. And the Raiders are in a spot right now at 2-6 where they can't afford to play too many politics. They have to be serious about developing their youth. Now, I will say, on the defensive side of the ball, you saw changes. Greedy Vance was in the slot, and Darian Porter was starting at cornerback over Kaiu Blue Kelly. So it seems like he's on board the youth movement on the defensive side of the ball, but not so much on the offensive side of the ball.
Exactly. And it just seems so middle school. I understand the politics that's involved in everything we do in life, whether it's being a sports writer, whether it's being a football player, whether it's being a corporate executive, like it's always involved. I get that. But to your point, he will criticize people openly and leave question marks out there almost on purpose, almost from a punitive way, versus the other guys get it. I mean, how many times is he going to say? How many times is he going to say that Forsyth has done a great job? I mean, now it's fine to say, hey, you know what, he did what he needed to do, whatever. But to say he's doing a fantastic job, I mean, don't believe your lying eyes. Is that what you're telling us, Pete? But anyway, I digress. But your point about the youth movement, absolutely moving forward. Now you're 2-6. I mean, this is where John Spytek, if he's got any balls at all, says to Pete Carroll, look, Pete, you got to play these young. I'm not telling you how to play them, where to play them. You got to play these young guys, because look, all these one-year veterans that we signed to these short-term contracts, they don't matter. They're going to be gone next year. You need to see what we got. I need to find out what I need to do in the draft and in free agency. So let's get it moving, brother. That's what he has to do. I said this on the postgame show. He needs to do that. Now, you talked about some of the youth, Darian Porter on the back end too, who had tackles. I just was not that impressed with him. Now, again, first big start there after Kaiu Blue Kelly. Did he do worse than Kaiu Blue Kelly? No. Did he do so well? You're like, wow, yeah, that was the right move. No, but you're seeing what you have. But Mo, I just think the more and more I watch this defense, the more and more I realize that it doesn't have nearly enough talent.
Doesn't have nearly enough talent, but I'll go back to this, and I said this recently. Look at the Seattle Seahawks defense since they moved on from Pete Carroll. Mike McDonald has his defense. Did you watch Sunday Night Football last night?
Yes.
Defense was flying around. Mike McDonald made some changes after Pete Carroll was ousted in Seattle or moved to a different role and then left the organization. But the old saying is, sometimes look at what an organization is or what an operational system is after a person leaves. Did it get better or worse after that? And I talked about the last 2 years with Seattle had with Pete Carroll. The defense was poor, subpar in his last 2 years in Seattle. And I'm not saying that it's poor here with the Raiders, but basic things like tackling being an issue in week 9, Scott. How is a defensive-minded head coach having issues with his team tackling in the middle of the season? Even when Mike McDonald got to Seattle his first year, they weren't struggling with tackling in week 9. It was more of a system thing and fitting certain guys in and trading players and finding the right fits, but they weren't struggling with something so basic as tackling. For a defensive-minded head coach's team to be struggling with tackling, that's a major concern.
It's garbage. I mean, it's inexplicable to watch a professional football team. The only team that I've seen worse at tackling, the Cincinnati Bengals, who have now yielded the most points through the first 9 weeks of a season in NFL history. So the Raiders aren't quite that bad, but they're in that field. They're in that bottom rung, no question about it. Now, I had a viewer ask me after the show in the chat, Mo, because Murph and I kept talking about the same issue with Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll's defensive-minded coach. That's how he came up. It's how he built his career. But then there are people who want to blame Patrick Graham. Where do you assign the blame on those two? We know that Pete Carroll is going to be involved in it. He's a defensive-minded coach. They have a bigger hand in the defense than they do on the offense. It's just the way it goes. How much can you put on Pete Carroll, and how much do we need to look at Patrick Graham and what he's doing?
You could probably split it down the middle 50-50, simply because I think when you watch the Raiders give up 3rd and longs, to me, that's a Patrick Graham issue. He's calling the plays down to down, is he not?
Right.
And if the answer is yes, then Raiders giving up those 3rd and longs is on him. When you look at the poor tackling and the coaching, the being prepared for these games, the unpreparedness, if you want to call it that, I put that on Pete Carroll because he's the head coach. This is his operation. He's the overseer of this. So if your team isn't prepared or they're poor at tackling, I put that on Pete Carroll's shoulders. When I watched the Raiders give up big plays on 3rd down, I put that on Patrick Graham because he's clearly calling the plays down and down. So I could split that blame pie down the middle between Pete Carroll and Patrick Graham.
Yeah, and the other thing there too is when you look at that and you see what's happening, because to me, I agree with you on the 50-50, because I look at the rest of the team on the offense side with Chip Kelly as well, but more so the discipline. Again, we saw this game start out with Daniel Carlson couldn't even kick the ball in the landing zone, right? There's this little discipline, and we saw him with Antonio Pierce too. Remember, I called that out as well. It's like these little things that add up because you're seeing unforced penalties. You're seeing mistakes like this, which point to a lack of discipline. To me, head coach owns that. The play calling on both sides of the ball is obviously the coordinator. So they own that as well. And again, we're going to take a break and then we'll come back. We'll talk about some Raider trade rumors, but I do want to touch on Chip Kelly when we get back to at the top of it. So we'll get to that here in a minute. This is Silver and Black today, the Tuesday edition. You're with Mo and Scott. We'll be back right after these words. All right, folks, it's time for me to tell you about our great friends at Sleeper. Of course, you know they're giving you the video all season long here on Silver and Black today as our sponsor. We're so proud to have them on board. We've been telling you all season about them and the special offer they have. It's all about picking daily fantasy football. And guess what? For Thursday's game, the Raiders, they're playing on Thursday night, so we get to talk about picking some Raiders, picking some Broncos. My choices for daily fantasy football. We'll get Moe's coming up on Thursday, and as you wait for the trade deadline to happen today, I'm going to give you some picks. Not only that, I'm going to give you a deal. You want a free $100? Yes. If you deposit up to $100 in your Sleeper Picks account, they're going to match it $100 as well. So you get a free $100 to play daily fantasy football. You can't play it better anywhere else. We've been telling you that all season long, and I'm here to tell you again. So what am I going to do? I'm going to tell you what I'm going to pick for this game. Let's start with the Raiders. Let's start with Superman. Forget Clark Kent, forget Batman, forget Wolverine, forget whatever superhero you're into. Brock Bowers is Superman. Anytime touchdown, yes sir, I'm going to take him on that. 65.5 receiving yards, yes sir. I'm taking both Brock Bowers picks on Sleeper Picks for daily fantasy football in this game Thursday night. What else? Ashton Genty, anytime touchdown. I'm going to stay away from that one as well. Trey Tucker, 31 yards. Daniel Carlson, field goal there. Anytime touchdown by Jacoby Meyers. You can see all the Raider picks here. Pretty good. I'm going to go with this one. We saw a lot of 2 tight end sets out of the Raiders in their loss to Chicago. In their loss this past week to Jacksonville. Yeah, can I get it straight, Scott? All right. I'm going to go 16.5 yards for Michael Mayer because I think he plays big as well. Now, on the other side, when it comes to the Denver Broncos, I know you hate the Broncos, the Donkeys, but guess what? Bo Nix, right now, passing yards, 150 plus, 175 plus. Yes, I'm going to take 175 plus there. So my picks this time, Brock Bowers, anytime touchdown, you bet. 65.5 yards receiving. Yes, sir. Michael Meyers, 16.5 as I complete my daily fantasy football tight end sweep for 16.5 yards, you bet. And Bo Nix, over 175 plus yards against that Forest Raiders defense. Make sure you check out Sleeper Picks. Go download the app. Get the free $100 deposit match up to $100 from Sleeper using the pick, using the code, of course, Genty. That's Genty, as in Ashton Genty. Do that. Don't forget, rules and regulations apply. Check them out on the Sleeper website or in the Sleeper app. Not available in all states, but most likely in yours. Make sure that you tell them Silver and Black today, saying you don't forget, $100 match on your deposit. Use the code Genty from Sleeper Picks. You're back. Silver and Black today, the Tuesday edition. Mo and Scott talking Raiders football. Before we went to the break, too, I forgot to remind you, subscribe to the show wherever you get your audio. Don't forget to rate and review as well. We appreciate that too. Okay, before we went to the break, we were talking about who's to blame, Pete Carroll, Patrick Graham on the defense, and then we also mentioned the offense a little bit, Chip Kelly. Mo, in this game, I thought Chip Kelly at times, again, showed great, what's the word I'm looking for? Showed great planning and scripting with this offense. They did well. They got Ashton Genty more involved in the passing game, which was great, but that came after they sort of abandoned the run. Ashton Genty didn't have as many carries as I would have given him. We saw on the other side, Etienne of the Jaguars get 22 carries. Instead, they seemed to go away from the run. They couldn't consistently run the ball, which is why you saw such a difference in time of possession between these two teams. But you look at Chip Kelly, did you see any improvement? I saw some, but to me, it wasn't enough to say, okay, Chip Kelly's now in a rhythm coming off the bye.
I felt like Chip Kelly, one thing I tweeted during the game was heavy tight end usage. You saw a lot of
12
Michael
personnel,
Meyers, so a lot of 12 personnel. So I like that part of it. I like the idea of having both those guys on the field and both of them contributing. You're hearing rumors, we'll talk about the rumors in a moment, you're hearing the rumors about Michael Mayer. Hope that's not the case, because those two on the field together can give defenses nightmares. So I like that part of it. I do agree with you with Ashton Genty and his workload. If you're going to draft a running back at 6, you better use him to the maximum. And he only had 13 carries on Sunday. I understand the Jaguars are really good against the run, but you still have to force those defenders to respect the run and that you're willing to run the football for balance. And I just don't think 13 carries is enough. He should be closer to 20 carries per game. Again, you're drafting him at 6. Now, if you were drafting him in the 3rd or 4th round, back in the 2nd round, fine. But if you're using premium draft capital to draft the running back at 6, he's going to be your workhorse guy. He should be close to 20 carries per game, whether the opposing team's defense is good at stopping the run or not. And I think it affected the balance a bit, but not enough where you're thinking it's egregious and it threw off the offense, because Brock Bowers was awesome. But feed Ashton Genty the football. It is good, a positive sign to see that Ashton Genty is getting the football a lot more in the passing game, though. I like that part of it as well.
Yeah, because we talked about that the first 4 weeks, that it just wasn't happening. How do you not? I mean, all you got to do is watch his tape from college and say, this guy is dangerous in space. Give him the rock. Not hard. But to your point, somebody took me to task on Sunday night, saying that if you give him 20 carries, that's 340 carries a year. That's too much. Now, 20 carries, if you're in a game, that doesn't mean you have 20 carries every single game. But when you needed to establish the run in a game like this against the Jaguars, where you just don't pass the ball well. Now, of course, Brock Bowers changed that a little bit. The Raiders still aren't going downfield because Geno Smith can't do it. He just can't do it right now. So when you have a game like that, this is what Chip Kelly said in the press conference last week. He said, we need to establish the run against this team to be successful. They couldn't do it. They did it a few times, and then they abandoned. They went to more of the short passing game because Brock Bowers was on fire. I get it. But you still need to go back. That's the other thing, too, that bothers me with Chip Kelly is he seems so quick to give up on these things. I'm not saying if you can't run the ball, you stick with it for 4 quarters. But do you agree with me on that maybe perhaps they switch out of it so quickly?
I don't know if it's a switch out of it quickly thing. It's just more of maybe that's part of the game plan. Maybe that was the game plan, that they weren't going to go run heavy in this particular case. Because, again, the Jaguars, I believe, going into week 9, a top 6 run defense. So Chip Kelly's probably thinking, we can gash this team in the pass in the passing game, because I talked about it last week. Well, we talked about it last week. The Jaguars were 27th against the pass, and I'm sure if I know this, Chip Kelly and the coaching staff know this, and they're thinking we can get some gains in the passing game. Not that they will abandon the run, but we'll go light with the run game and try to attack their weakness, and that's what they try to do. Now, again, it worked with Brock Bowers being awesome, but not to say Ashton Jenkins needs exactly 20 carries. And notice I said closer to 20 than 10. I'm not saying give him 20 carries per game on the dot, but 16 carries, 17 carries in certain games, to me, is where you want it to be. But again, I'll give a positive for him having 5 targets, 5 catches, 47 yards, and a touchdown. So seeing Ashton Jenkins involved in the passing game was a positive sign again.
Well, and for all the gnashing of teeth over the Tyler Lockett signing and how he's going to take snaps from people or targets from people. He had 1 target, by the way. I said this Sunday night too. Brock Bowers, he's the number 1 receiver on this team. So Brock Bowers is going to take targets and snaps from people because he is the best player on the field when it comes to receiving the ball. Plain and simple, right? Mm-hmm. But we talked about Geno Smith too, going downfield. Other than those passes to Brock Bowers, a lot of yards after the catch, Geno Smith averaged a depth of target of just 4.1 yards and his air yards percentage of 39.6. Yes, he completed 76% of his passes and had the 4 touchdowns. But this again talks to the point, Mo, that from a wide receiver perspective and from an offense perspective, to your point about game plan, the Raiders just aren't going to go vertical. They for whatever reason, don't feel they have the people to do it outside now of Brock Bowers, who does his own vertical thing, I guess. And I don't think that's going to change either.
I don't think that's going to change either. And I say this again, I don't feel like the Raiders trust Geno Smith all the way to just, I don't want to say go bombs away, but they're obviously noting that he's throwing all these interceptions. He has 11 now. So with him throwing those interceptions and being turnover prone, you don't want to be too aggressive in the passing game and give too many possessions away to the opposing team either. So they trust him throwing to Brock Bowers, but if you've seen Jacoby Meyers' numbers recently, I don't see how the guy gets an extension with the numbers he's been putting up, because when Geno Smith targets him, it seems to be either an interception or a short gain. It's not a game-changing play. Like there are guys on the football field who make plays, and you forget them because I don't want to say they're negligible, but they're not game-changing plays. Jacoby Meyers will get a few catches here and there, but is it putting you in position to score? Is he scoring touchdowns? No, he's not.
Right. And I think it explains a little bit. Maybe he kind of saw this and said, hey, that's why he wanted out. He just didn't see it being a successful season. Maybe that was an early tip. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. I could be reading into it. But let's transition now, Mo. As people first listen to this podcast, at least a lot of you will hear it Tuesday morning. Today is the trade deadline at 4 p.m. Is it 4 p.m. or 5? I can't remember. 4, right?
4 p.m. Mm-hmm.
4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. So many of you might be listening to this a little bit close to that deadline. So some deals might have been made, but at the time of recording the show, we're going to look at some of the. I want to ask your opinion on this, Mo. You cover, and Mo's going to be completely swamped all day today on Tuesday with trade stuff for Bleacher Report. But the 3 names that we've heard so far from the Raiders as we record, of course, Jacoby Meyers. We just talked about him. Ian Rappaport most recently reported that they're open to trading him, but it's up in the air whether the deal will happen. Interest from other teams needs to match the team's asking price. It seems like the Raiders still asking a lot for Jacoby Meyers, which is staggering considering the points you just made, that his numbers are not exactly exciting for people. Second name we're hearing, as you mentioned earlier as well, Michael Mayer, although Albert Breer says the Raiders aren't looking to move him. They might be taking calls, but they'd always take calls. And then Ian Rappaport again lists Malcolm Kuntz as one of the pass rushers. And I don't understand that one because I don't think Malcolm Kuntz, coming off that injury, has really done much. Mo, you hear these 3 names. Give me your opinion on all 3 of them. And then is there anybody else we're not talking about that could be a candidate to get moved besides, of course, Jackson Powers Johnson, which I don't think will happen, but could?
So Jacoby Meyers, I think, is the most likely candidate to get moved simply because you said it. Brock Bowers is the Raiders' number 1 wide receiver. And Trey, let's be honest here. Over the past, 5 to 6 weeks, Trey Tucker has been a better, more productive wide receiver than Jacoby Meyers. They just brought in Tyler Lockett, so now they have a veteran wide receiver just in case they move Jacoby Meyers. And Jacoby Myers openly said, yeah, I still want to play elsewhere. He didn't say those words, but they asked him if he still wanted his trade request granted. And he said, oh, for sure. He doesn't want to be there. And for me, if I'm a GM, a guy, unless he's a star player, and even a star player, the star player doesn't want to be there, then I'm trying to make a move behind the scenes before it goes public. Now, the league knows Jacoby Myers doesn't want to be there, and the trade value is not going to be what you want it to be. So I think he eventually gets moved. You talked about Malcolm Kuntz. I agree with you. Malcolm Kuntz coming back from that torn ACL is not the same player. I don't see what team would want him. I know he's on a one-year deal, so it'd be a prorated contract. But I don't see where a team is thinking, we'll bring in Malcolm Kuntz, he's going to help our defensive line. Michael Mayer, I don't think he gets moved simply because the two tight end sets look pretty good on Sunday, and I think you want to keep that going. As far as Jackson Powers-Johnson is concerned, I actually think there's a possibility he gets traded simply because behind the scenes, I feel like there's, and my Bleacher Report audience called it drama between Jackson Powers-Johnson and the coaching staff. And I think Jackson Powers-Johnson has kind of held back from saying things publicly that he wants to play center, but deep down inside, he wants to play that position. He talked about it on Max Crosby's The Rush podcast about how prideful he is about playing the center position. So you can't convince me that all of a sudden he's okay with that. And the coaching staff doesn't see him the same way we or the fans see Jackson Powers-Johnson. Pete Carroll has continuously said he's competing for a job with Alex Kappa. They signed Alex Kappa to a 2-year deal, and they drafted Caleb Rogers in the 3rd round, and they're moving him from right tackle to guard. So, in my opinion, Scott, they already have Jackson Powers-Johnson's replacement on the roster, at least in the short term. So it wouldn't surprise me if he is traded.
Yeah, and I would watch if he is. And again, I'll get into it in a second, but I would watch the Rams and the Seahawks. You mentioned the Seahawks, Pete Carroll's old team. Both those teams are doing well, but could use a center, especially one that's going to be young. So I'd watch those two teams as trade partners. But this goes back to my question, and Murph and I talked about this on Sunday. What is John Spytek's role? If they trade Jackson Powers-Johnson, because of all the reasons you mentioned, the drama with the coaching staff, does that mean Pete Carroll's really in charge?
I'll say this, right? Keep in mind that John Spytek didn't draft Jackson Powers-Johnson.
No, true.
So I don't think it necessarily means Pete Carroll is in control, but I do think Pete Carroll has a lot of control because he is more experienced in his position than John Spytek is at his. I talked about this last week. John Spytek is a first-time GM. Pete Carroll had personnel power in Seattle, though he was paired with John Snyder, who's an experienced GM. So you can't tell me that if he had personnel power with an experienced GM, then he has no personnel power with an inexperienced one in his first year in a full-time position. So without a doubt, Pete Carroll is pulling a lot of strings. But I will also say that John Spytek is not tied to Jackson Powers-Johnson because Tom Telesco drafted Jackson Powers-Johnson. John Spytek did not.
Right. It just would say to me, I mean, this just calls into question for me, and maybe it's things I didn't see from the get-go, is if these hires together were the right move for this organization. And I have more doubt every day. Because if you made the perfect point there, Mo. Look, you have a guy who's got more experience, more player personnel experience, obviously coaching experience with a first-time GM. Why did you do that then? Why, you're hiring one position for the future and you're hiring one position for the now? Like it just doesn't connect for me. And it goes back to wondering what's wrong with this organization, Mark Davis, and the decision-making, or if it's Tom Brady having a lot of decision-making in the process, say, hey, bring Spytek in. Pete will do all the stuff for a while Spytek learns under him. Okay, that's not how it was sold. But certainly if this happens too, I think it might be indicative of that as well. So very interesting. But I think that the organization, as we see all over the league, all these teams that have troubles, including the Raiders' troubles, going back to the later days of Al Davis when he wasn't 100% healthy, goes back to organization, bad organizations. The Bengals, we talked about that earlier. The Titans, all these teams that struggle, the Browns, all have organizational structural issues. And those are really hard to overcome.
Really hard to overcome. For the Raiders situation, I think the ideal pairing head coach GM for that is a young offensive-minded head coach, right? Innovative head coach and an experienced GM.
Yeah.
And I say that because then I think you would have a balance of power, because then you have a head coach who probably was just an offensive coordinator, doesn't know much about personnel power, so he's not going to be pushing for personnel power. He just wants to coach his offense and have his quarterback, whereas the GM with experience will then have the short and long-term vision for the football team, and they can both have some type of, again, balance of power. When you have a head coach who's very experienced and a GM who's very inexperienced, usually what you're going to have is a head coach who's going to be pulling the strings. You saw that with John Gruden and Mike Mayock, an experienced GM, very experienced head coach. Now, Josh McDaniels wasn't a super experienced head coach, but he had been a head coach before, and he was paired with Dave Ziegler, who had never been a full-time head coach. So again, he had a lot of pulling power behind the scenes. Josh McDaniels did. So if I'm the Raiders and I'm Mark Davis and I'm hiring again, I want a young, innovative head coach with not much personnel power, decision-making decisions. And I want a GM who's very experienced, who can sit the head coach down and say, look, you call the plays, you do the day-to-day operations, but I'm the personnel guy. I'm going to make the roster decisions.
And tell me, young coach, you're the dynamo, right? Tell me what you need to run your offense, to run your defense, whoever you bring in to run defense, and I will go get you. I will evaluate the players best for that. You'll be involved, obviously, to give us some feedback, but I will go get the tools you need to run your offense, right? That's how it should work. That's what we're seeing in places like Chicago and other places. Denver's a little bit different, but you're seeing these young offenses come along under these coaches. And Ben Johnson in Chicago, it looked bad at the beginning of the year, Mo. Look where they're at, right? Yes, they win by the skin of their teeth sometimes, but they're still winning. And you're seeing better performance out of Caleb Williams and so on. So, yeah, I can't argue with you there. All right, we're going to take our final break. When we come back on this Tuesday edition of Silver and Black today, we're going to get to your phone calls. So see what you have to say on the Raider Nation switchboard. It's Scott. It's Mo. We're coming back right after this. Welcome back, Silver and Black, today, an Odyssey Sports original podcast. Do us a favor, go subscribe to the show and rate and review wherever you get your audio. We certainly appreciate that. It's time for the Raider Nation switchboard here on the final segment, the home stretch of this edition of Silver and Black today. Mo, by the way, I had so many people, even though there were some positives coming out of the Raider loss, man, people are getting so over the top negative. I understand it. And again, we always say it on the show. We're not going to tell you how to fan. If you want to be angry, totally get it. I'm okay with that. But moving forward with the show, I think we got to start thinking about how we follow some of these young players and evaluate them, right? Mo, talk about some of these guys. At this point, wins and losses, yeah, you'd like to see the Raiders win some games. But to me, it's so much. And as a fan, just for mental health purposes, I would recommend that you find some of these guys, whether it's Dante Thornton or whether it's Ashton Genty or some of those other guys, Darian Porter. Watch them, see how they progress. And I think we'll do that on the show too. We'll start to point out, hey, how did they do in this game, and dive deeper on that. Because some of the I don't think Geno Smith's going to suddenly wake up and have a stellar year. So talking about Geno Smith every show is going to get a little boring. So I want to focus on that. You think that's a good approach for Raider Nation out there to maybe keep some of their sanity?
Yeah, and that's what I said on my Bleacher Report Live Sunday. Again, I don't tell people what to watch or how to watch their football team, but I said what I'm going to be paying attention to is how these young players progress. So we talked about Dante Thornton Jr. being inactive, Jack Bech not very much being involved in the offense on Sunday, but Greedy Vance in the slot is a rookie playing in a big role. Now you have Darian Porter in the starting position in the big role. Also, Tristan McCullum, former Eagles cast-off, who they picked up, was in on 3 safety sets. So the Raiders are turning to the youth again in their secondary, and you would hope that those guys are going to progress because Pete Carroll's a defensive-minded head coach. So we'll see. But I would track those guys' progress to see where they are now versus where they end up at the end of the season.
Right, and it's hard because as a fan, you watch the game, right? You're watching the game to see your team compete. Sorry, I know that's a dirty word now. Compete, and so you're watching the totality of the game. And as a fan, that's what I would do as well. But I would take just a little bit of extra time when they're on defense. Watch McCollum, watch Porter, watch those guys. If JJ Pegues, if Tonka Hemingway, still one of my favorite names, if any of those guys can actually get active and be in a game, Just watch them though, right? Just key in as the camera moves and see how those defensive linemen are getting and on replays of good plays and whatnot. And the same goes on offense. So we'll see how it goes. All right, let's get to your calls. We're going out to our buddy Dave Casper, the Ghost, first up here on this edition of the Raider Nation Switchboard.
Hey, boys. Dave Casper, the Ghost from upstate New York, a couple hours after the heartbreaking loss against Jacksonville. Listen, I'll state some of the obvious, and it's probably stuff some of the other callers have stated. Clearly, offense is dramatically different with Brock Bowers in the lineup, night and day. He's arguably, not arguably, he is the best tight end in football as of now. But the end of the game, they're just not good enough in so many areas of the team. Poor tackling, lousy special teams, the end of the first half, missing the extra point and then giving up a 68-yard field goal. The long kickoff return in overtime. Mostert had a few great kick returns, but it's just poor, inconsistent play, and bad teams find ways to lose. Obviously, the pass got deflected at the end because that's what happens to bad teams. Mm-hmm. I'm glad they were competitive. I'm glad that they had some fight in them. But at 2-6 and going into Denver on Thursday, it's time to play the kids. Jack Bech didn't play, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember seeing him on the field. Dante Thornton was inactive. Get the kids in there now. Trade off Jacoby Meyers, whomever. I don't want to see Meyers traded. I love the two tight end set going forward. JPJ, I rumored that he might not be on the move. He's your best offensive lineman. There's a personal thing going on between him and the coaching staff. I hope Spytek or someone steps in and says, we're not moving him. But this team needs help in so many areas. Just play the kids, and I'm glad they put up a fight. But at the end of the day, a loss is a loss. Geno throws another pick and missed extra point. That's what happens to bad teams, unfortunately. And Denver on Thursday and then Dallas on Monday night. That's hit or miss. Play the kids. Let's get the rebuild started now. All right, boys. I'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, hard to disagree. I think he repeats a lot of what we've been talking about on the show today, Mo. The special teams thing we talked about, usually a natural time when you get, especially if you have a middle of the season bye, if a coaching staff's going to have some shakeups, like you're going to change out an offensive line coach, or you're going to change a special teams coach, you kind of do it at the bye. Now we're officially after this last Raider loss, you're at the midpoint of the season. It would also be another natural time to do it, especially after the failures we saw on special teams against the Jaguars. My question for you is, we want to see younger players in there, as Dave Casper the Ghost talked about. Let the young guys play, no question. But might it also be an opportunity to say, hey, you know what? We're moving on from Tom McMahon as special teams coach. We're going to let somebody else step up and see if they can do the job. Yeah, it's an interim job, but why not do the same thing with some of this coaching staff?
I mean, that's a decision that I'd be on board with. I just don't see it happening with Pete Carroll and company. Yeah. I just see this. I just see this regime being very rigid when it comes to their coaching staff. And if they're going to make changes now, at this point, I think it happens in the offseason, because if it didn't happen over the bye, then you're probably, I don't want to say stuck, but you're probably dealing with this coaching staff for the remainder of the season. Tom McMahon, though, I don't understand the allegiance to Tom McMahon, because remember, Tom McMahon was from the previous regime.
Yeah, they inherited him.
They inherited Tom McMahon, so it wasn't like he came in with Pete Carroll and crew. I don't see it. I understand, as Dave Casper the Ghost pointed out, Raheem Mostert, the positive on special teams, Raheem Mostert looks good on special teams.
Absolutely.
But everything else, kick coverage from week one, from beginning of the season, has been terrible. I don't know what they're doing with their kick coverage team. Brutal. But allowing teams to just get into, midfield, start their drives at midfield, is putting the Raiders defense at a disadvantage. And we all know the Raiders defense has its issues. So then on top of its issues is tackling, you're putting them in a position to give up at least 3 points because other teams are starting at the 30, 40, sometimes midfield, 50-yard line. So I don't see why they would be tied to Tom McMahon, but it seems like he's going to finish the season as a special teams coordinator. If they do finish it with him, I will look for a new special teams coordinator in the offseason.
Unless there's some maybe Pete Carroll nephew out there who's looking for a job, then maybe they move him in as the special teams coordinator. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Dave, Casper the Ghost, always thanks for your call, man. All right, now off to Tarek in Chicago, our buddy.
Hey, Scott and Moe, what's going on, fellas? Just saw the Raiders lose in overtime at home to the Jaguars. Pretty wild game. It's deflating, you guys. It seems like we're never on the winning end of games, of exciting games like that. It's crazy to think that game was 9-6 heading into the fourth quarter. Geno Smith was booed pregame. And again, he ended up coming on strong at the end. But for most of the game, it was a pretty poor performance again. I mean, again, his first pass of the second half was a pick, but he finished with 29 of 39, 285, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick. But I still think that I will concede that he still gives us the best chance to win at quarterback. But they just got to figure it out. I mean, for most of this game was ugly. And the play calling was questionable again for most of this game. I expected a more inspiring performance after the bye, considering like the passing of Carroll Davis, getting Brock back, who obviously Brock Bowers is that dude. But I think once the season's over, the Raiders need to do what Denver did. They need to bite the financial bullet like Denver did with Russell Wilson, and they need to move on from Geno Smith. I know that sounds weird considering the numbers he just put up and the kind of game it was, but for the most of this season, he's been absolutely atrocious. Potato chip Kelly, same thing. For the most part in this game, nobody seems like they're having a lot of fun out there. It got interesting at the end, especially obviously in that fourth quarter, but Malcolm Kuntz has been dreadful. We're paying him $12 million. I mean, the guy's completely forgotten how to play football. No Jack Bech sighting at all. No Trey Tucker. I was surprised to see Tonka Hemingway and JJ Poquest inactive today because the defense was gassed in that fourth quarter. Etienne gets stronger and stronger as the game goes on. You can clearly see them struggling to tackle and contain him in the fourth quarter. It just seems like, again, for most of this game, it's such a grind to just score points, and our special teams let us down again. And like last year, it looks like everyone in our division is headed to the playoffs except for us. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this game. I mean, it was an interesting, fun game to watch. Obviously, it's too bad it ended the way it did because Lockett was clearly wide open in the back of the end zone. Deflected ball, you really can't do anything about that. I'll be flying to Denver in 3 days, you guys. They're without Patrick Surtain, and Denver's offense still looks really, really lethargic. So on a short week, hopefully we're kicked off at this, and hopefully we make it somewhat interesting this Thursday in the Mile High City. Talk to you guys later. Looking forward to all your shows this week, all your great coverage. Keep up the fantastic work as you guys have been doing this whole season. And I'll talk to you later. Bye, guys.
Hey, there you go, Tarek. Appreciate it, man. People keep talking about Denver's offense not being very good because it's not very exciting. They're top 10 in touchdowns in the league, Mo. I mean, and I know Bo Nix is kind of hot and cold sometimes. But anyway, just saying that I'm not some big Bronco supporter, but I'm just saying be careful what you say when you look at that. But Tarek's points all well taken. I think that when you look at this team and you look at the defense, particularly, I called that out on Sunday. The Raiders defense was on the field for 77 snaps. They gave up 17 points in the fourth quarter and another 7 in overtime. So 24 points in the final 2 quarters, if you want to call it that. Less than a quarter, obviously, in overtime. Any defense is going to go through that. And again, I pointed back something we've been talking about since last offseason. When you don't have depth, you don't have possible depth active because you have those young players inactive. It was undoubtedly going to happen. That was all a direct result of complementary football or their lack thereof, where you couldn't run the football to maintain longer offensive possessions, which is how Pete Carroll was successful in other stops.
If you studied Liam Cohen, going back to his time in Tampa Bay, remember Liam Cohen comes from the Sean McVay coaching tree. Sean McVay sets up his offenses with the run game. Last year, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had a top 5 rushing attack. Liam Cohen is going to run the football. And knowing that, as a Raiders coach, I would have extra D linemen available, a deep rotation, which means I would have some of those rookies you talked about, Tonka Hemingway, JJ Pegues, available and active for the football game, knowing this. So the Raiders go into the fourth quarter. It's obviously a long game that goes into overtime. Tarek pointed it out as the game went on. It seemed like Travis Etienne got stronger, was able to get some yardage. Bashaw Tootin had a touchdown as well. Knowing that Liam Cohen is going to run the football or try to establish the run with his guys, drafting a running back in the fourth round in Tootin, why not have those young guys available? And this is a coaching, I guess what you call coaching malpractice, right?
Yeah.
Know your opponent. That's the first thing. Know your opponent. Study your opponent's tendencies.
Game planning,
game planning. And I don't think the Raiders, I think they failed on that one because they were on the field. The Jaguars went with the run, even though they weren't averaging a ton of yards per carry. And this is why I think the Raiders should have done with Ashton Jeanty, why they should have fed him more carries to wear down that Jaguars defense and potentially get some leeway in late in the fourth quarter and overtime. That's exactly what the Jaguars did. And that's why you saw the Raiders start to give up plays at the end of that football game. They couldn't stop Travis Etienne, couldn't stop Bashaw Tootin. Trevor Lawrence, who came to that game sick, had two touchdowns as a ball carrier. But that's what he does, right? So knowing that Trevor Lawrence can move with his legs and often scores touchdowns as a ball carrier, you want those big bodies in the middle, and the Raiders just didn't have the horses to stop them.
Absolutely correct. Great call there. Okay, now let's go out to our buddy Yan Dog, also upstate New York, if I recall. And Yan Dog, let's see what sage wisdom he has for us today.
Hey, Scott. Hey, Mo. Yan Dog. Here's my new attitude for November. The letter N, new month, new mindset. The letter O, open doors to positivity. The letter V, value what truly matters. The letter E, embrace every moment. Letter M, move with purpose. Letter B, believe in yourself. Letter E, expect good things. Letter R, reflect, reset, and rise. Your number one fan, Yan Dog. Go Raiders.
Look at that, dude. See, this is what hey, man, this is what I was talking about earlier. Remember about
Yan Dog, over and out.
There he goes. He wasn't done yet. No bark?
Bark?
No bark from Yan Dog. That's okay, though. That's okay. Dude, we were talking about this earlier, right? People getting so overly negative. And it's like, I get it. Again, the passion's there, and I understand the emotion involved. But there's a great example of Yan Dog laying it on the table and saying, yes, nobody's happy with where the Raiders are, but new month, new mindset. Go through that again. I mean, just great stuff, man.
I like that. I need to replay that for motivation. If I get down in November, I'm just going to replay Yan Dog's acronyms there and just have a whole new mindset on the day and on the month. Look at that.
See, that's why I like our listeners. We had to ban a couple people in the chat during the post game because it was just, people targeting Murph, people targeting other listeners on there. And look, I'm just not going to put up with that shit here. It's just not going to happen. Not as long as I have the show and Mo and I are on the show. Are we going to put up with that kind of crap? It's just there's enough negativity, and I mean personal animosity and all this kind of crap in the world. We don't need it here. I don't mind if you're critical of us or the team. That's fine. We're positive about the team. Okay. A lot of people mad at Murph because he's too positive. I'm like, too positive, too negative. You know how it is, Mo. We can't ever be in the middle. You're either one or the other to the audience.
I'll say this really quick. It's always hard to have a real discussion about your football team after a loss.
Yes.
So I'm not telling our listeners to stay on social media, but just be mindful. With a lot of fans, emotions are very high after a loss, especially after a loss like Sunday. So just be mindful that you're not going to get a lot of real conversation with people. It's just a lot of emotional stuff thrown around, and people start attacking others. And that's why I kind of stay away from social media for the most part after football games.
And even our callers, who are all great. By the way, if you haven't called in the show before, 702-900-7869. I should have given the number out earlier. 702-900-7869 if you want to be a part of the show. Our callers, too, I find that when the callers for later in the week for our Thursday show, that's when we get a lot of the gems. Like they've had the weekend, the loss, whatever it was, to think about it. And then they come back with hey, here's what I think is going to happen in the game coming up. But also, hey, I thought about this, I thought about that. So it's a great point, Mo, that you make there. And I think we see it come to life with those calls. All right, we're going to close out the show now, going to Denver. where the Raiders are playing on a short week, Thursday night, and we'll talk about our show Thursday just to set your stage for that. But here comes Raider Eddie up in Denver.
Hey, guys. Hey, Scott and Moe. What's up? This is Raider Eddie in Denver. Love the show. Love you guys. I want to chime in and just kind of stream of consciousness, you guys, after that loss last night to the Jaguars. I was really looking for Jack Besh and the young wide receivers to get opportunities, and they didn't. And I did see and hear Tyler Lockett out there on the field. To me, that was going in the wrong direction. We've already discussed that. I continue to be concerned about that because I don't trust Pete Carroll to develop young players. I really don't. I haven't seen it, so I'm not sure. I just wouldn't trust him to do that going forward. Did Pete have the team prepared better? Yeah, I think that he had the team prepared better than last week, but I do not believe that he's elevating anybody on this team, particularly the defensive backs. A lot of people talked about Pete Carroll and hard-nosed defense and potentially being able to get more out of young players, particularly defensive backs. I didn't see that. I'm not seeing any of that development from those young guys. So I have some real concerns. I still am not seeing a trend towards Pete being the guy for next year. I think he's just made too many poor decisions, and just would love to hear your thoughts, you guys. Again, I don't think the team quit yesterday, but I do think the team is not being elevated in the way you'd like to see a team under a good head coach and good coaching in general. Guys, love the show. Raider Eddie in Denver out.
Raider Eddie, great call. And listen, I resisted, or I should say I defended the signing of Tyler Lockett a little bit, saying that didn't have to come at the expense of snaps for young players. But here, looking at the snaps from Sunday, Mo, Trey Tucker, 97%. He was out there for 62. Jacoby Meyers, 89% at 57. Jack Besh, 0 snaps. Alex Bachman, 0 snaps. Tyler Lockett, 19 snaps, or 30% of the snaps. So I can't argue with fans who were saying, oh, he's going to take snaps from the young players. He clearly did after just 3 days of being on the team.
I'll say this. I didn't mind the Tyler Lockett signing, as you said, if it didn't come at the expense of the rookies. But I'll also say 19 snaps is not exactly taking a ton of snaps from the rookies. I feel like the Raiders coach staff has decided that the rookies just aren't ready to contribute in a big role, so therefore we are going to sit them. And I think that's the wrong approach. Right. I said this during my Bleacher Report Live on Sunday. These players aren't going to get better watching football. You can go to all the meetings and watch all the film you want. You're not going to get better watching other guys play. You get better by actually being on the field, being in situations, and playing football. Right. So to me, the wrong decision was sitting those guys, because I think you can have Tyler Lockett active and have Dante Thornton Jr. active, Jack Besh active as well. But the Raiders decided not to do that. I think that was the wrong decision.
Also, though, I want people to consider before you just look at the receiver snaps and say, well, that was his 19 snaps or 30% of the snaps in the game were at the expense of Jack Besh or Alex Bachman. Remember, Brock Bowers, 81%, 52 snaps. Michael Mayer, they were both healthy for the first time, 83% of snaps. He had one more snap than Brock Bowers. And then you had Ian Thomas, who had 11. So remember, you had, as we talked about earlier, you had a lot of 12 personnel and sometimes even 3 tight end sets, because you did. That also eats into the snaps because your alignments change, Mo.
Right. When you have 2 tight ends in the field, it means you're taking off a wide receiver.
Right.
So Michael Mayer and Brock Bowers both being healthy and playing a full workload means less or fewer snaps for a wide receiver. And that also probably factored into why you didn't see Jack Besh, why Dante Thornton was inactive. I know a lot of people want to say it's a Tyler Lockett signing, but again, 19 snaps doesn't scream, oh, he's taking snaps away from the young guys. Michael Mayer being active and Brock Bowers being active and both on the field at the same time in 12 personnel means 1 fewer wide receiver. And I think that's the biggest factor in why you didn't see the young guys play. But Chip Kelly, as Tarek called the potato chip Kelly, Chip Kelly needs to figure it out where he has a healthy balance between his young wide receivers and a good 2 tight end set.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you to all the callers. Again, if you want to be part of the next show, call in and leave us a message at 702-900-7869. That's 702-900-7869 to be part of the show. Okay, Mo, now you got a busy day today. It's trade day. You cover trade deadline day for Bleacher Report. Let everybody know how they can track that. Well, obviously, you'll be tracking too what the Raiders do. Let people know what you're going to be doing today and into tomorrow around this trade deadline.
So if you pull up the Bleacher Report app, it'll be on the front page. We are grading every trade as they come in instantly. Myself and 3 other colleagues are doing that. So we have that tracker going. On Tuesday, I will have a winners and losers piece for every team after the trade deadline. So after the trade deadline, there's a winner and a loser for each team, meaning if a player acquires an edge rusher, let's say the Raiders acquire an edge rusher, the loser would be Tyree Wilson because he's losing snaps. Malcolm Koonce was an improve-it-year deal. I know he's been playing well, but he would be a loser because he'd be getting fewer snaps. So that's the concept of that trade piece. But there are 2 running on the Bleacher Report app that I'll be a part of. So if I'm not answering your DMs, if I'm not answering your calls, if I'm not answering your texts, I'm not ignoring you. I'm just very busy during the trade deadline.
Yeah, and I think we talked about it earlier. I think that's going to be a very busy deadline. So you're going to need to drink those avocado smoothies, take some extra vitamins, make sure you're eating good food, and be ready for a long day. Now, the Raiders play on Thursday. Of course, we have our regular Thursday show. So we will go with our Thursday morning show, which in essence kind of becomes a pre-game show as well. So we'll be back. We'll recap any trade movement that the Raiders were part of course, for a Thursday show. We're also working on a guest to talk about the Broncos. I might have Mark Schlereth on. We'll see. I know how much you guys love him, but a good analyst, and he had some great things to say about Ashton Genty and Max Crosby. I want to talk to him, and Brock Bowers. He called Brock Bowers now his favorite player in the entire NFL. So we'll get him to talk about that if he's indeed on. We're trying to work around his schedule. So we'll have that, and of course we'll have some of your phone calls on Thursday as well. So we'll be a pregame show, which will be awesome, and we'll be able to talk about that, and then of course the game on Thursday night. So that's going to do it for us, but we appreciate you being with it. Mo, thanks, my friend. I will pray for you today to make sure you make it all the way through trade deadline day. It should be exciting, but I know you do great work.
Take care, Scott. Take care, Raider Nation. One thing I forgot to mention, if there are any trades for the Raiders, I will be discussing them on a separate video on Bleacher Report, either Tuesday or Wednesday.
Nice. So stay tuned for that. All you got to do is follow Mo on X. MOEMOTON is the handle. You can follow me at LV Gully, also the show SNB Today. Raider Nation, have a good one. We will talk to you Thursday. Take care of one another.